Australia is home to stunning landscapes, but scattered across this vast continent are places you will never be allowed to visit. Some are guarded by the military. Others are protected by ancient laws that predate European settlement. And a few are very dangerous that stepping inside means you might never come back alive. These are places where trespassing lands you in federal prison, where the land has been declared so sacred that your presence violates thousands of years of cultural law. From secret military installations in the Red Desert to radiation zones that will poison you within hours, Australia's forbidden places tell a darker story than any travel brochure ever will. Today, we're uncovering 13 locations the Australian government, traditional landowners, and nature itself have declared absolutely off-limits. If you try to visit, you will be stopped, and the consequences are very real. Number 13. Pine Gap, Northern Territory. 16 kilometres southwest of Alice Springs sits one of the most secretive intelligence facilities in the entire world. The official name is Joint Defence Facility Pine Gap, and from the air, it looks like massive white golf balls scattered across the desert. Those spheres are radomes, covering satellite dishes that intercept communications across the Asia-Pacific region. Pine Gap is jointly operated by Australia and the United States, specifically the CIA and NSA. The facility has operated since 1971, and the public has been told almost nothing about what happens inside. Pine Gap monitors satellite signals, tracks ballistic missile launches, and provides intelligence for military operations thousands of kilometers away. During the Iraq War, intelligence gathered at Pine Gap was used to coordinate drone strikes in real time. The entire facility is surrounded by high security fencing, motion sensors, and armed guards who patrol 24 hours a day. Approaching without authorization is a federal crime. You can be sentenced to 7 years in prison for being in the exclusion zone. Even photographing from public roads can result in arrest. In 2005, Christian peace activists cut through the fence and walked onto the base to protest the war. They were arrested within minutes and sentenced to jail. The base remains one of the most restricted sites in Australia, where even members of parliament have been denied access. Number 12. Ashmore and Cartier Islands, Indian Ocean. 320 kilometres off the northwestern coast lie the Ashmore and Cartier Islands. These tiny specks are officially Australian territory, but you cannot visit them. The islands are uninhabited, declared a strict nature reserve and no-go zone for all civilians. Ashmore Reef consists of 3 small islands surrounded by coral reefs teeming with marine life. The waters are breeding grounds for seabirds and sea turtles. The reefs are pristine, untouched by tourism. The government intends to keep it that way. The entire area is protected, and unauthorized landings are prohibited. But there's another reason these islands are off limits. They sit in a strategically sensitive area near Indonesia and have become an arrival point for asylum seekers. The Australian Border Force monitors the area heavily. Even scientific teams need special permits that take months to obtain. If you landed on Ashmore or Cartier without permission, you'd face massive fines and imprisonment. The islands remain one of Australia's least visited territories, where nature has absolute priority over human curiosity. Number 11. Hartog Island and McDonald Islands, Southern Ocean. 4,000 kilometres southwest of Perth, deep in the freezing Southern Ocean, lie Hartog Island and McDonald Islands. These volcanic islands are among the most remote places on Earth and are completely off limits to the public. Hartog Island is dominated by Big Ben, an active volcano rising 2,700 metres above sea level. The volcano erupts regularly, sending lava flows to black sand beaches below. The islands are a UNESCO World Heritage Site with unique sub-Antarctic ecosystems. Massive colonies of king penguins and elephant seals cover the rocky shores in their thousands. The islands have never been inhabited, and scientists want to keep them that way. Access is restricted to approved research expeditions each year. Getting to Heard Island is nearly impossible. There are no regular transport services. The journey by ship takes weeks through some of the roughest seas on the planet. Even if you had the resources, you'd need government authorization, almost never granted to private individuals. Heard Island remains one of the loneliest and most forbidden places under Australian control. Number 10. Woomera Prohibited Area, South Australia. Covering more than 122,000 square kilometres of desert, the Woomera Prohibited Area is the largest land-based weapons testing range in the world. This is where the Australian Defence Force tests rockets, missiles, and bombs far too dangerous to detonate anywhere near civilian populations. The range was established in 1947 and has been the site of countless explosions, including British nuclear tests in the 1950s. Those tests left radioactive contamination that lingers in certain parts of the range to this day. The entire area is heavily restricted, with entry controlled by the Defence Department. You need a permit to even drive through certain roads that cross the range. Inside Woomera, you'll find missile launch pads and impact zones where spent ordnance lies scattered across red sand. Some sections are contaminated with unexploded bombs from decades of testing. Signs along the few public roads warn drivers not to stop, not to leave vehicles, and absolutely not to touch anything they find on the ground. Security patrols monitor the range constantly. Anyone caught trespassing faces serious charges. In 2002, anti-nuclear protesters cut through the perimeter fence. They were arrested and charged with entering a prohibited defence area. The range remains one of the most dangerous and heavily guarded zones in Australia. Number 9. Macquarie Island, Southern Ocean. Halfway between Tasmania and Antarctica lies Macquarie Island, a windswept sliver of land that rises out of the Southern Ocean like a fortress of rock and ice. The island is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most strictly protected nature reserves in the world. No tourists are allowed, no private vessels can land, and even scientists need years of planning and government approval before they're permitted to visit. Macquarie Island is home to millions of seabirds, including royal penguins found nowhere else on Earth. Elephant seals haul out on the beaches in numbers so vast that the entire shoreline appears to move. The island's ecosystem is so fragile that even the introduction of a single non-native species could cause catastrophic damage. That's exactly what happened in the past when rabbits, rats, and mice were accidentally introduced by visiting ships. The Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife Service manages the island, and access is limited to approved research teams and the small group of scientists who staff the permanent research station. Even these individuals undergo strict biosecurity protocols before stepping foot on the island. Every piece of equipment, every boot, every bag is inspected and cleaned to ensure no seeds, insects, or microbes hitch a ride. The weather on Macquarie Island is brutal. Winds regularly exceed 100 kilometers per hour, rain falls 300 days a year, and temperatures rarely rise above 10 degrees Celsius, even in summer. The island is surrounded by some of the roughest seas on the planet, making any approach by boat extremely dangerous. For all these reasons, Macquarie Island remains one of the most isolated and restricted places in Australian territory. Number 8. Nauru Island Detention Centre, Republic of Nauru. Technically not Australian soil, but funded and operated by the Australian government, the detention centre on Nauru Island has become one of the most controversial and restricted places connected to Australia. Asylum seekers who attempt to reach Australia by boat are sent here instead, processed offshore in conditions that human rights groups have repeatedly condemned. Journalists are banned from visiting the detention centre. Photographers are not allowed inside. Even Australian politicians have faced obstacles when trying to inspect the facility. The Australian government maintains tight control over who can visit Nauru, and the Republic of Nauru itself enforces strict visa requirements that effectively keep outsiders away. Journalists who've tried to report from Nauru have been denied visas or deported within days. The people detained on Nauru live behind razor wire fences in a facility designed to hold them indefinitely while their asylum claims are processed. Some have been there for years. Reports from inside describe overcrowding, inadequate medical care, and mental health crises. But because access is so tightly controlled, verifying conditions inside the centre is nearly impossible. In 2016, The Guardian newspaper published more than 2,000 leaked incident reports from inside the Nauru Detention Centre. The reports detailed allegations of abuse, self-harm, and children suffering severe psychological trauma. The Australian government's response was not to open the facility to scrutiny, but to tighten restrictions even further. To this day, Nauru remains one of the most inaccessible and secretive detention facilities in the world. Number 7. North Head Quarantine Station, Sydney. Hidden on the cliffs of North Head in Sydney Harbour sits the old quarantine station, a place where arriving ships were once held in isolation to prevent disease from entering Australia. Between 1832 and 1984, thousands of passengers and crew members were detained here, many of them dying from diseases like smallpox, plague, and Spanish flu before they ever set foot in Australia. Today, the quarantine station is one of the most haunted locations in the country. The sandstone buildings still stand, covered in graffiti carved by quarantine passengers over a century ago. The hospital wards, the morgue, and the isolation blocks remain intact, filled with the echoes of suffering and death. While parts of the site are open for guided ghost tours, large sections of the quarantine station are strictly off-limits. The restricted areas include the original graveyards, the isolation wards where the most contagious patients were kept, and the underground tunnels that run beneath the complex. These tunnels were used to transport bodies out of the station without alarming the other detainees. The tunnels are considered structurally unsafe, and the government has sealed many of the entrances to prevent unauthorized access. People who've explored the restricted areas report strange occurrences. Disembodied voices. Cold spots in rooms where patients died. Shadows moving in empty hallways. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, the quarantine station remains a place where death is embedded in every stone. And the most haunted sections are kept locked away from the public for good reason. Number 6. Uluru Summit, Northern Territory. Uluru, the massive red monolith in the heart of Australia, is one of the most iconic landmarks in the world. But climbing to the summit has been forbidden since October 2019. The traditional owners of the land, the Anangu people, have always considered the climb a desecration of a sacred site. For decades, they asked visitors not to climb, but tourists ignored the requests. The Anangu people believe that Uluru is a living cultural landscape created by ancestral beings during the Dreamtime. The paths up the rock follow the roots of these beings, and climbing them is equivalent to walking through a church while people are praying. It's disrespectful, offensive, and deeply painful to the traditional custodians of the land. In addition to the cultural reasons, climbing Uluru is also dangerous. Over the years, at least 37 people have died attempting the climb. The rock face is steep, the surface is slippery, and the heat can be extreme. Rescue operations are difficult and expensive, and the Anangu people have carried the burden of watching tourists risk their lives on their sacred site. When the climb was finally banned in 2019, it was celebrated as a victory for Indigenous rights and cultural preservation. Today, anyone caught attempting to climb Uluru faces heavy fines and possible criminal charges. The summit is off limits, and it's going to stay that way. The focus has shifted to experiencing Uluru from the base, learning about its cultural significance, and respecting the land and the people who have cared for it for thousands of years. Number 5. Rottnest Island's secret military tunnels, Western Australia. Rottnest Island, just off the coast of Perth, is famous for its cute quokkas and pristine beaches. But beneath the island lies a network of secret military tunnels built during World War II, and they are absolutely off-limits to the public. The tunnels were constructed to house heavy artillery and ammunition in case of a Japanese invasion that never came. The tunnel network stretches for kilometers beneath the island, with bunkers, storage rooms, and gun emplacements carved into the limestone. After the war ended, the tunnels were sealed and forgotten. Today, only a handful of people know the exact locations of all the entrances, and the Western Australian government has declared the tunnels too dangerous for public access. The reasons are simple. The tunnels are structurally unstable. Sections have collapsed over the years, and the risk of cave-ins is high. Unexploded ordnance may still be present in some of the storage rooms, and the air quality deep inside the tunnels is questionable at best. There have been reports of people breaking into the tunnels and getting lost in the darkness, requiring emergency rescue operations. While a small section of the tunnel system has been opened for guided tours, the vast majority remain sealed. Warning signs are posted at known entrances, and anyone caught trespassing in the restricted areas faces prosecution. The tunnels beneath Rottnest Island remain one of Western Australia's best kept and most dangerous secrets. Number 4. Lake Pedder, Tasmania. In the early 1970s, the Tasmanian government made one of the most controversial environmental decisions in Australian history. They flooded Lake Pedder, a pristine glacial lake surrounded by pink quartzite beaches, to create a massive hydroelectric reservoir. Environmentalists fought the project for years, but they lost. The original Lake Pedder was drowned beneath the rising waters of the new reservoir. Today, the area around Lake Pedder is heavily restricted. Large sections of the reservoir and the surrounding wilderness are part of the Southwest National Park, a World Heritage Area with strict access controls. Some areas require permits to visit, and others are completely off limits to protect fragile ecosystems and endangered species that live in the region. But there's another reason certain parts of Lake Pedder are forbidden. Deep beneath the surface of the reservoir lies the original lake, perfectly preserved under hundreds of meters of water. The pink quartzite beaches are still there, untouched and invisible. Some environmentalists have proposed draining the reservoir and restoring Lake Pedder to its original state, but the project would cost billions and remains highly controversial. For now, the original Lake Pedder is a ghost, a lost landscape that you can't visit because it doesn't exist in the world above water anymore. The areas around the reservoir remain restricted to protect what little wilderness is left, and accessing the most remote parts without permission can result in heavy fines. Number 3. Dirk Hartog Island's exclusion zone, Western Australia. Dirk Hartog Island, off the coast of Western Australia, is an ecological restoration site where the government is attempting to bring back species that have been extinct on the mainland for decades. To do this, they've created an exclusion zone covering most of the island, and entry without authorization is strictly forbidden. The island has been cleared of all introduced predators, including feral cats, goats, and foxes. In their place, scientists have reintroduced native species like the rufous hare wallaby, the burrowing bettong, and the banded hare wallaby, animals that once roamed the Australian mainland but were wiped out by European colonisation. The project is one of the most ambitious conservation efforts in the country, and it's working. The reintroduced species are thriving. But maintaining this fragile ecosystem requires total control over who enters the island. A single person carrying seeds on their boots could introduce invasive plants. A tourist leaving food scraps could attract rats from passing boats. Even well-meaning visitors could disturb breeding sites or spread disease. For these reasons, access to Dirk Hartog Island is restricted to authorised research teams and a small number of approved tour operators. The exclusion zone covers the majority of the island, and trespassing carries serious penalties. The Western Australian government has made it clear that protecting the island's wildlife takes priority over public access, and this policy is unlikely to change anytime soon. Number 2. North Sentinel Islands Maritime Buffer, Andaman Sea. While not technically Australian territory, the maritime waters around North Sentinel Island fall under international law that Australia enforces in certain contexts. North Sentinel Island is home to the Sentinelese, one of the last uncontacted tribes on Earth. The Indian government has declared the entire island and the waters surrounding it a strict exclusion zone. The Sentinelese have violently rejected all contact with the outside world. In 2006, 2 fishermen who accidentally drifted too close to the island were killed. In 2018, an American missionary ignored all warnings, paid fishermen to take him close to the island, and was killed within minutes of stepping onto the beach. His body was never recovered. The Indian government enforces a 3-mile exclusion zone around the island, and any vessel that approaches is warned away by the Coast Guard. The Sentinelese are protected under Indian law, and disturbing them is a criminal offence. Even attempting to make contact is illegal. The policy is clear. Leave them alone. Australia respects this exclusion zone when patrolling nearby international waters, and Australian vessels in the region are briefed on the dangers of approaching North Sentinel Island. The island remains one of the most forbidden places on Earth, a reminder that not every part of the world is meant to be explored. Number 1. Maralinga Nuclear Test Site, South Australia. Between 1956 and 1963, the British government conducted 7 nuclear tests at Maralinga in the remote South Australian desert. The explosions vaporised everything within kilometres, and the radioactive fallout spread across the land, poisoning the soil and groundwater. Indigenous Australians living in the area were not warned. Many were exposed to radiation and suffered horrific health consequences. After the tests ended, the British made a half-hearted attempt to clean up the site. They buried contaminated equipment in shallow pits and left plutonium scattered across the desert. In the 1990s, the Australian government conducted a more thorough cleanup, but even today, parts of Maralinga remain dangerously radioactive. Warning signs mark the contaminated zones, and entry is strictly prohibited. The land around Maralinga has been returned to its traditional owners, the Maralinga Tjarutja people, but large areas are still too contaminated for safe human presence. The soil contains plutonium-239, which has a half-life of 24,000 years. It will remain deadly for longer than human civilization has existed. Trespassing in the contaminated zones at Maralinga is not just illegal, it's suicidal. Prolonged exposure to the radiation will cause cancer, organ failure, and death. The site is monitored, and anyone caught in the exclusion zones faces immediate arrest and serious criminal charges. Maralinga stands as a grim reminder of the cost of nuclear testing and the scars that remain on the Australian landscape. So what do you think? Are these restrictions truly necessary to protect ecosystems, sacred sites, and public safety? Or has Australia gone too far in keeping citizens away from parts of their own country? Should places like Uluru be open to more visitors, or does conservation require absolute protection? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this fascinating, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Australia's hidden corners. Thanks for watching.